Hello and welcome to the Hard Questions. I'm Solomon Serwanja. On this episode, I host the leader of opposition, the Honorable Mathias Mpuuga, to discuss, among others, the performance of Parliament, but also his role whipping the opposition and giving an alternative to government. Honorable Mpuuga, thank you so much for accepting to speak to us.
Thank you, Solomon, for having me.
Great. First of all, I must say that I'm grateful for the opportunity. It's been long coming. But let's get into it. In December, you'll be making 2.5 years as leader of opposition.
Yeah, true.
In your view, what have you done in that seat that you think you should celebrate yourself on as leader of opposition for the last 2.5 years, so to speak?
Well, Solomon, in these spaces, we rarely count our chickens. And when we occupy them, the understanding quickly is the public duty, to which you do not expect applause from the gallery. And coming from a background of working in this kind of autocratic environment, you can only do so much. The beauty is that I'm not the first leader of the opposition in this era. And therefore, trying to understand what we have accomplished is not very difficult. First of all, in a very long time, I have led the biggest group of opposition members of parliament. Hitherto, the numbers were hardly 40, 50. For the first time, we have had 109 members of the opposition, including about 10, 12 independents. That I lead. I hope you don't ask me whether all the 109 are loyal to the opposition, but at least numerically and on paper, I have led the biggest number of opposition in Parliament, and it's both an opportunity and a challenge. Secondly, leading the youngest opposition party in the country and in Parliament. It's very uncommon and rare that a party registered for the very first time goes to the polls and leads the opposition. Everything fresh, new, and therefore you've had to have your own beginning and try to cultivate your own foundation, both as an individual, mirror the group, enjoying the party, and be able to have a background. So one of the things I can say without contradiction is that I was able to give this young party, the NUP, a foundation in the Parliament, mentored its members of Parliament. Out of 57 members of Parliament I was given, hardly 15 had had a term in Parliament, so the rest were new members of Parliament. So for me to be able to put them together and capacitate them to be able to understand the intricate nature of the work of Parliament, you know, these corridors are very unforgiving. The very day you are sworn in, the expectation is that you're able to move and do things as though you've been here for generations. So I was able to capacitate. I've been able to capacitate my team. My team has been working, albeit and lots of challenges, to be able to give NUP a face and also assure the nation that, one, we are not where we are by mistake, but also, if we were given a chance, we could have given this country something fresh to begin with, because within that time, we have ably articulated our policy stance on every length and breadth of this country, on matters of the economy, security, governance, devolution of power, budgeting. So we have been a full package over the last 2 years. And you cannot ask, the question of whether the opposition has an alternative no longer arises in our time. Nobody can question is whether the opposition has an alternative. We actually have not just an alternative, but a smarter option for the country. And we have articulated in writing, on the floor, in documents, what would have done different and better if we had the tools of power.
Yeah. You hinted about something called the budget, the budgeting process, and I have seen a lot of guidance on budget allocation. But the latest story on the budgeting process is fellow members of the opposition in Parliament querying the budget to Parliament itself. 934 billion shillings allocated to Parliament. And specifically, the Leader of Opposition has been allocated about 3.4 billion for the entire financial year. The Democratic Party came out to say that this budget for the Leader of Opposition and for the Speaker needs to be slashed, and perhaps that money goes into better service delivery. Let me break it down for you, especially for your budget. According to the records, the office of the Leader of Opposition is supposed to receive 3.6 billion shillings. Among that, we have 1 billion shillings caters for allowances. We're having 119 million shillings going into welfare and entertainment. Travel, inland, about 490 million shillings. Fuel, 228 million shillings. And about 11 million shillings for beddings, clothing, and footwear. That goes for your office alone. And later on, of course, the Speaker's office was budgeted for about 13.1 billion shillings alone. The Honorable Mathias Mpuuga, I know before, who used to really speak up against public expenditure, the President's expenditure, the State House budget. Looking at the breakdown of this budget makes me question whether anything has changed. What do you think about the budget allocated to your office, and do you agree with fellow members within the opposition that think that this has to actually come down?
Probably on another day I'll ask you whether I have done anything different from my predecessors, but that's not the question. But I wanted to bring you fast forward that that's the same budget for the Lopo's office over the last 20 years. Same figures, same allocation. Does this surprise you or shock you? That's been the same budget for 20 years. First of all, when you see a vote on allowance, allowances are based on activities undertaken. When, for example, I travel out with my team to do oversight, like you've been seeing me, and members are allocated a small allowance to be off station. If it is an allowance without sleeping outside their locality, it comes with an allowance for hotel accommodation. It is without accommodation for lunch. And as simple as that. And as long as you have not taken an activity, my budget is based on activities taken. If the activities are not taken, the money remains. The allowances for the shadow cabinet, when they sit, every month they're given a stipend of 1.5 million for my shadow ministers, for the work they do, or producing alternatives, sitting every Tuesday, doing oversight. That is the length and breadth of it. You've talked about clothing and what. That is for security and drivers. The law is not give nobody buys clothing for its drivers have uniforms.
They allocated 11 million.
Yeah, that's not for the law to take home. Actually, the general feeling of an ordinary person is that the law has that money somewhere in his drawer, in his office.
To buy you suits.
To buy new suits. Far from the truth. This office has an accounting officer at the level of a director who is an employee of government. He handles money. The LOP does not even know the color of the money in his office. When the LOP has an activity, he notifies the director, who is the accounting officer of the department. This is the full-fledged department of Parliament. And then he will work out what is required to undertake an activity. That is the long and short of it. So anything else that comes with it, if the allowances, somebody takes the allowance because they have undertaken an activity, and that's how work is structured. Travel inland, if we have traveled for an activity, people either get an allowance or fuel for it. I have 3 vehicles that I move with for security and my personal vehicle. If they are traveling, they consume fuel. If they have not traveled, the fuel will remain and the money will go back. That's how it works here. There's nothing, when I join as a LOP, I am given a catalog of what I'm entitled to, and that is it. You cannot demand it for what you're not entitled to. So my prudence as far as budgeting is concerned remains. And as far as imagine we were probably 48 members of parliament from the opposition for so many years. At some stage 52, we are 109, same budget. Are we extravagant? That is for you and the analysts.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. You said that for, well, you didn't mention that before you got into this office, criticizing the budget for the leader of opposition. But let's talk about the budget of the speaker, which has significantly grown. According, well, at least for you, you say it's been the same budget for the last 20 years. Sure. The speaker's budget has, however, increased significantly to about 13 billion shillings. Quite a big frog. If you look at what the Honorable Rebecca Kadaga's tenure in the last 20 years, in your own words, the speaker's budget has increased significantly. Now, I would expect the Mathias Mpuuga to say, look here, yes, it's parliamentary commission, but the speaker cannot have this money. That's the Mpuuga I know. Have you raised up on the floor to challenge at least the expenditure for the office of the speaker and perhaps the deputy speaker? Would you want to make a comment on that?
It would be imprudent of me to do that, because the budget of the speaker is handled with the rest of the budget. And when we talk about prudential budgeting, we talk about usage and purpose. The budget of the speaker, like the entire budget of parliament, goes through the stages, through the committee, first from the commission, to the committees of parliament, to the budget committee, to the on the floor parliament. And the committee for rules, for legal and rule and discipline, the one that handles the commission budget, when it is handled there and sent to the budget committee to compare with the needs presented, it is their business to do it, not an individual. So it's not proper for me to be put to pit my office, that of the speaker. I run an office, and I don't think in prudential governance I would jump from defending my budget to criticizing the office of the speaker.
Part of your role is oversight. You do that for State House.
Certainly.
What's the difference with the office of the president and the office of the speaker, I think, in terms of expenditure?
It is easy to simply speak about it. But remember, I'm a member of the commission. That's what I'm talking about. It would be imprudent. If the people believe that the speaker's office has a bloated budget, I don't think there's a legal bar in talking about it. Probably, I have not seen it the same way. The speaker has entitlements because he heads an institution called parliament. And under the doctrine of separation of powers, the speaker heads an institution called parliament, just like John Museveni heads the executive, and the Chief Justice heads the judiciary. Probably, a few things have changed from the Rebecca Kadaga times to these times, including the way the economy is structured. I must confess that I have not fully educated myself on the areas that constitute inflated budgeting on the part of the speaker's budget and office. I must say that probably now that you have brought it generally also, you're not specifying where are the bloated areas, bring it to my attention, then probably we can compare.
Classic example.
You are speaking generally.
No, classic example, 2.6 billion shillings to procure 2 cars. That is something that I thought the opposition would grab and say, look, this is not acceptable.
What would be the cost of
2.6 billion shillings to procure 2 cars for the speaker and the deputy speaker? That raises eyebrows to a Mathias Mpuuga, to say, look, we cannot buy 2 cars at 2.6 billion shillings for the speaker and the deputy speaker.
What would be the cost?
Averagely, if you look at the procurements that way, and I think you've been following the story, I'll turn the question back to you. Do you think it's prudent to buy the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker cars worth 2.6 million, especially when you're a member of the Parliamentary Commission?
You know, unfortunately for me, I am driving an old vehicle I found in Parliament. And when we question procurement generally, we do not question an individual. We question the entire budget process and what is expended. In my view, it may not go down to the lope, picking out the Speaker and Deputy Speaker as a big extravagant. I think that would be a question in bad taste. I question generally government budgeting, and I question what informs the choices people make. I question what informs the nature of procurement made. I question what informs what is used by all the officers of government. And the Speaker is one of them, and the Deputy Speaker. I don't want to zero it down to the individuals or the bearers of the offices.
Yeah, and we're actually talking about the office itself.
Exactly.
You question the budget of State House. Tear it in pieces. Break it down and say, look, it's not fair that State House is given to this. You lead an army of people who are supposed to raise the red flag. And indeed, they have done that on the floor. Classic example, the Honorable Uganda has come out strongly again under your leadership as leader of opposition to stand up against the budget for the executive and State House, to be specific. I find it unfair for you to say, I cannot go to that for the position of the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker.
Do you think the Honorable Assembly did not see the office of the Speaker's budget?
Well, but you are the leader. And you're supposed to look and say, you're the leader, and you're supposed to say, look, my team, let's scrutinize the budget and say, let's give our way forward on this.
For what we said as the opposition, in as far as budgeting is concerned, we looked at the possibilities and the impossibilities. And you see, the way we fight our battles as politicians probably is not the same way journalists see them. And I can understand it. And if we are going to go and fight the political stroke budgeting battles, we cascade them. We're not going to be fighting every corner, everyone, and then be listened by no one. Assuming you want to cut back on the budget of State House and you want to begin a debate as part of ensuring that prudential budgeting ensures in Parliament, do you start with the budget of the Speaker? Do you start with that of State House? Where would you begin from if you were a smart politician?
It's government. It's made up of the executive, Parliament, and the judiciary.
Yeah.
And your role as an oversight, as the House, is to play oversight, to say, look, this is too much.
Yeah, I think everything has a starting point.
Especially with the economy that we are in.
Solomon, every attempt has a starting point. If we started with the presidency, please allow us to start with the presidency. When we succeed with it, we shall tackle others. We're not going to be everywhere and nowhere. I think we're a bit more focused in the way we handle our battles. And I don't want us to lose that focus by throwing stones everywhere and focusing on nothing. Okay. We're a bit more structured in the way we fight. And I think you need to agree that if you are going to bring Parliament to bear on the budgeting process, we cannot be fighting like we are blind in the way we are focused on our battles.
A section of MPs actually think otherwise. They think the Mpuuga we thought could be is not the Mpuuga that we see now. And some have described your relationship with the Speaker as too good to be true and too good for comfort. They feel that you are so close, that you have been blinded to really focus your attention on giving, you know, going straight up and giving direction, you know. They think that your relationship with the Speaker is so solid that it sort of, people think that you've lost your grip on providing that sense of direction in this House.
You know, Solomon, the difference between those you speak about in general terms and not in specific terms, I wish you mentioned them. Now that you're speaking generally, I want to inform you that I have a fair probably a better understanding of how politics plays in this country. I know how much I need to do with the speaker if I want to change the politics of this country, and how much I can do with others. And I know how much power the speaker wields in the bigger scheme of things, and how much capacity is around the speakership, the presidency, and other powers. So nobody can blind me to blackmail that, you see, I am so close to the speaker, and therefore. So what is it one thing that we're supposed to do as the opposition that we haven't done because of that claim? They expect me to do what? To come and shout at the speaker? To insult the speaker? And I am the LOP? Is that the general understanding? That part of the job of the LOP is to come and shout in the face of the speaker so that he is praised out there. I'm not the kind. And probably I have a fair appreciation of this game than so many loud-mouthed individuals out there. And if you ask me, a lot of them need education. And those who have really cared to learn have learned a thing or two on how intricate these relations play out if you are going to be impactful. It's very easy to die and fizzle in one day because you want to impress. I am not used to playing to the gallery. I carefully choose my actions, and when I choose them, I think the impact is eternal. I dare not play to the gallery because it's short term. And doesn't help anyone. That's how I work. I don't think I will change tomorrow. I want my impact to be purposeful. I distinguish between purposeful actions and the action to the gallery.
Okay. One of the things that really came out strongly, where we thought that the opposition would really stand up on their feet, was the ROCO deal. When the Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Taiwo, and I think you were not in the House at that time, when, you know, an issue that wasn't on an order paper was brought up, Parliament passed it. I know that there were efforts from your office to retable it, and the next time we heard is that it will be brought back at a later date. It's been over a year now. It hasn't yet been brought back. We thought under such a circumstance that the opposition would rally itself around and say, look, we are not going to put money in this, and therefore move a motion or something that you could table on the floor to try to revoke that decision. At that time, people thought that we would have seen your leadership strongly manifest at such a time as that.
I don't know how many journalists and followers and viewers and bloggers take time to understand how Parliament works. Apart from the general comments people make, I don't know that they even bother to know the powers of the Speaker, even when they are wrongly exercised sometimes. And this is where we sometimes go wrong. I don't know whether actually you, the public commentators, played out to the public our debate and our reports on the ROCO deal. And I don't know whether actually the media has been keen on airing to the public our position on the deal on the floor of Parliament. And when we did that, it didn't come out. And when the Speaker pronounced that and said the matter has been settled, if you want to have a motion on the floor of Parliament, how do you do it? You go to the Speaker. And you simply spring up and say, I have a motion?
No, you write to the Speaker. After 3 days you've not had, then you can come up with it.
Do you simply come up with it?
No, you have to go to the Speaker's office and put in a request.
So why don't you tell that to the public? That actually, at the end of the day, if that happens, then you have the Speaker in the spotlight, not the head of the opposition. You want the law to strip on the floor to prove a point that you should have seen my leadership. A report is brought. A report is led. The House takes the position of the opposition. Okay? And that's what happened. We presented a minority report. And it was taken by the entire House. So what are you asking of me? Besides, do you want us to discuss, do you want us to discuss how politics is playing in this country and how it plays in the House?
Honorable Mpuuga, we've seen MPs walk out under your leadership of the opposition when they stand up against some of these unfair things in the House, really ganged up and move out and stand and say as opposition, this is our stand. Do you then think that after that was done, it's settled and everything, and there's nothing you can do absolutely as the leader of opposition to actually resurrect that issue? It's done and dusted. We did our bit. It's on the record and we move on.
Solomon, walking out is not by cram work, that every time you jump and walk out. No, our actions are valid and they depend on the circumstances prevailing at the time. And it's not that every time you have a disagreement, walking out is the solution. We shall walk out sometimes. Sometimes shall speak up. Other times shall stay. And the choice to take which action is entirely on us, not because the public prefers that we walk out. There's a reason why we have leadership in the House. And when we take a choice not to walk out, it should be respected. When we walk out, it's not after a referendum. No, we educate ourselves on what is happening at the time, and we make a choice to say, today we shall walk out, today we shall not walk out. And that should be respected. Okay? So walking in and out cannot be the panacea to every problem. So when we make a choice, that should be respected.
Okay.
Yeah. Because we are leaders. Do you want us every time we want to take a decision to first go and consult? Then what is leadership about and for? Yeah. The fact that you are aware, as everybody does, that there was a problem, for me is good enough. It's on record, the record of Parliament, that something was wrongly done. The presiding officer banged up a matter upon which Parliament had taken a resolution. How can that be my problem?
And so you give up and sit back?
Give up? Why are you talking about it now?
It's a year later.
It's never died. It's never died. Public interest will follow it up.
It's a year
It's
later.
still a public
Mpuuga.
interest matter. Is it the only matter after 1 year upon which Parliament has failed to act the way that we thought would have been resolved?
But who else can bring that issue except you as the leader of opposition in the House?
I brought the matter and I thought it followed. The best way to bring a matter is through a report, not by jumping up and down.
I hear you.
Yeah. That's the best way. At least for me, you probably have another way. For me, that's the best way.
Okay. Let's talk about whipping your people in the House, the opposition members of Parliament. Honorable Mathias Mpuuga, I know you as a man of credibility, a man of stature, a man of someone who I have followed all throughout as a politician, and I've covered this House for quite a while. When your MPs who you whip or who you lead are involved in bribery scandals, I get shaken a bit. The 40 million shillings bribery scandal, July 2022, where we saw members of Parliament bagging 40 million shillings that came from nowhere. I saw you put up a fight alongside another member of Parliament who was then directed to the Rules Committee and all that. Bribery, we expect that MPs, opposition MPs, should stand beyond reproach and therefore have the moral authority to question people in power on corruption, on excesses. When we hear that even some members within the opposition in the House get this money and better still refuse to return it, it then pokes holes in the credibilities of members of Parliament, of the opposition in Parliament that you lead. your views on bribery within this house and amongst your team.
Solomon, issues of bribery are matters of personal prudence, and nobody should be enjoined in a matter where somebody individually indulges in a situation that really puts their person and character into perspective. When these matters arose, I convened a caucus of the opposition. I convened particularly 2 caucus meetings of NUP here in Parliament and at the party headquarters, and we addressed these matters. We did not only caution, but even directed whoever came into contact with the said monies to return them. And you see, there were allegations. The said source of the money said, I have never given anybody money. Then a member said, I am here, I was given money. And my simple advice, will you please return the money wherever you picked it, because it was illegal obtained. The consequences, the outcomes of that.
You are summoned.
So that's why I say these are matters of personal prudence, and nobody should be enjoined to defend or protect one's intelligences. No. My job as a team leader is to question, to advise, and tell my members that these corridors are very intricate. Wherever you press your hand, your feet, you must be careful. And when people, you see, these are not children, Solomon. I am talking about colleagues elected with me on the same day, and they have their constituencies. When I caution you, when I try to show you what is acceptable and not acceptable, and you choose otherwise, that's a question of personal indulgence, and you must be able to carry your cross. I've been here in the 9th Parliament, the 10th Parliament, and we returned the monies sent on our accounts. You recollect so well. Yes. On 2 occasions, myself and a few colleagues returned the monies sent on our accounts that we could not explain. We returned that money to the sender. And that's the record which I can defend. I have no space to defend the records of individuals that have no personal probity to protect and defend. So, but my job as a leader is to caution my members and say, hey, this space you occupy is intricate, and therefore take care of yourself. Please be conscious. If you're not sure, the very least, ask for guidance. And I have no regrets in reprimanding and holding in total contempt colleagues that are not able to smell the coffee and see that they're being driven into a ditch from where they may not recover permanently.
Yeah, as a leader of opposition, what then do you do beyond just cautioning them? For example, because then, I mean, I've told you to return the money, you have refused. Maybe let me put you out there as people who have refused, because then you're making...
No, Solomon, the fact is, I did not have any evidence. Apart from one Kagabo who came and said I was given money, I didn't have evidence of people getting money. So I would look stupid to try and...
But they got it on their accounts, some of them.
No. That's not true. That's not true. That's not true. That's not, we actually as a party tried to investigate and said, did the people get money on their accounts? Even Kagabo said he did not get money on his account. He said he was called somewhere. That's why I told him to return to that same spot.
Go back to the same...
I actually gave him security to escort him where he picked the money. So there's nothing much you can do. These are adults. And you see, when you see mature people behaving in that kind of manner, your duty as their leader is to say, this is the boundary. Okay? But you see, at the end of the day, I have no doubt that the public will take them to cleaners. I have no doubt about that. But I'm talking about members of parliament, not my children, Solomon. I don't have powers of arrest or prosecution for that matter. My powers are simply political, to go and speak. Wherever I believe a member is behaving imprudently, I'll tell the people that that person is not one to rely on when the time comes. But also I must be careful in how I do it. It's not something I'm going to go and shout about everywhere. without bearing in mind the fact that some of these fellows are doing it probably to bring down the opposition deliberately, because some of these are hired guns, and the way they behave, you look at them and say, okay, that was your game. Yeah. So you must have the conscience to know the motivation behind the actions of particular individuals.
Okay. Honorable Mpuuga, you are a leader of opposition in parliament, and you don't only, lead the NUP party. Do you feel that you have done your duty to unite the opposition in this house, including, the Democratic Party, the Front for Democratic Change, and all these other opposition political parties in the house, to unify them as the leader of opposition during your tenure, 2.5 years?
Solomon, unlike my predecessors, I took up this house, this office, from a background of a highly contentious and divisive election, you recollect. And in that election, the opposition was sharply divided and spoke sharply against one another. And that was a very, very difficult background to begin with. So when we came into the house and we took up leadership of the opposition, you recollect that so many of our comrades never gave us a chance. There are those even who played down publicly our capacity. There are those who wanted to probably, should I say, claim that probably we shall either hire them or patronize us. You had that patronizing language from a number of circles. But thankfully, because of the way I handled those disagreements, I was able to crawl back and bring sanity into the opposition rank and file in Parliament. Even when, you see, the fact that I was able to fully constitute a cabinet representing the entire opposition, where all opposition parties are represented, was the very first step. And when these MPs, these members took up the positions, that was a very good step. Even when they were facing a bit of, clawback from their mother parties. So the team in Parliament has been working well and together. Forget about individual capacity, background and what, but on the whole, if you asked me, I am proud of my team, both in the committees and in the shadow cabinet. Not that we don't have a bit of voids, but because I have been around for a bit of time, I can, not because I'm the team leader, but there's a difference, a remarkable difference in the way we have worked, given the background of our formation. The formative stages were acrimonious, but we're able to work and be able to say and speak about the issues we speak about. My committees have produced reports, probably on a record and unprecedented, and I have not had problems of bribery in the PACA committees, which for me is a huge plus. Remember the indictments around PACA committees, the failure to produce reports. I am proud that my teams are producing reports. That speaks to how we have led the opposition.
Let's talk about, it's about 2.5 years to elections. And the Supreme Court recommended that we need to have, if any, electoral reforms or constitutional reviews 2 years before the elections come in. The time is coming. The Electoral Commission released its calendar. They need the money they needed to secure an election. We haven't had anything on electoral reforms or constitutional reviews coming to the House. Time is running. You were in the previous parliament where the Constitutional Affairs Minister brought in the reforms late. And I remember the opposition was up in arms with some of those things. They did not incorporate the issues from the Supreme Court recommendations. It was just crazy at that time, with only changing the word independent for the Electoral Commission. I remember that was really strong. We have time. What is happening in terms of tabling constitutional reviews or electoral reforms in this House? Is the opposition in Parliament putting some pressure on the executive to table these reforms? Where are we on that subject?
Two things are critical, Solomon. One, whether it's the interest of the ruling party to reform anything. That's for them. In as far as the opposition is concerned, it's absolutely in our interest to have not simply electoral reforms, but a new constitution. And at the beginning of my term, I outed a legislative agenda, and critical to my path was to engender and lead the onslaught on constitutional review and electoral reforms. 2 months ago, I tabled my views to the leadership of the opposition in and outside Parliament. You probably followed our retreat in Munyonyo over 2 days. And on my part, as the leader of the opposition, I tabled what I think is basic, immediate, and must be handled. And the rest remains with the opposition in the Parliament, the opposition parties in and outside the Parliament, to think through the options. I cannot frolic on my own and table reforms without the tacit and direct approval of my party, of the joint opposition caucus, of the joint opposition platform and actors, including other stakeholders in the opposition. So what we resolved, if we recollect that time, was that we go and undertake inter and intra-party consultations so that we can agree on what the next step to take in as far as constitutional and electoral reforms are concerned. That's where we are. But strictly speaking, we all understand and appreciate the urgency and the need to have constitutional and electoral reforms. And that thread, that conversation was all that we had, and the thread of the desire was all over. The only distinction was that nobody had the faith to believe that the ruling party had the desire to support, let alone introduce the desired reforms. That's where we are. And once I am flagged off by my party, I am ready.
Clearly, as you've said, that you don't see a government that wants to do any reforms. It's most likely, if this government is not serious with the electoral reforms, is they're going to take their time. And then we'll have a replica of really what happened.
Invariably, yes.
That means we expect the opposition to actually put some pressure on the executive to table these reforms. Are we going to see that?
You want me to make a disclosure of the meetings in my party or the intra-party meetings? That's what you're saying?
I want some commitments.
No, I cannot be the one. I can't make the commitment. I'm saying that once we believe it's the right moment, they'll be tabled. But as the team leader in Parliament, I've been ready for the last 3 months.
Previously, Parliament and indeed the members of opposition used to work closely with members of civil society during the Citizens' Compact. You know, you remember collecting the views and the thoughts of people. You worked in tandem. There's a deafening silence on these issues, Honorable Mpuuga. Do we see some more proactiveness in terms of engaging civil society, in terms of, starting it up in time? I feel like we are not there yet. And yet this country, to shape our democracy and to have a semblance of a free and fair election, these are very critical. It's very critical that we establish the Independent Electoral Commission in its all, intents and purposes, independent. I feel like there's need to start that, a reawakening of the need for electoral reforms in this country. Needs to start.
Solomon, luckily, I was part of the team that engendered the process that produced the Citizens' Compact.
Exactly.
And when we met in Munyonyo, I actually told the meeting that part of what we needed to do in order to produce a workable document is actually available. Only that a few things over the last couple of years have since tilted, and we needed to dust up a few positions and have a conversation over them and be able to convince the country as to how we needed to migrate. One of the most useful presentations that day was made by Council Walubiri. I remember, for example, in the Citizens Compact, we did not, for example, go deep to discuss where an election can be declared. How and where do you declare an election? And one of the things said that in Uganda, and as we know it, the elections are declared by the Electoral Commission at the national level. In other countries, a presidential election is declared at every district. That's why in Masaka, the Electoral Commission, the registrar there will announce the results of the president and say, but wait for the final to be announced where?
The Electoral Commission.
The Electoral Commission in Kampala. And that is a small matter, but the most important matter. I hope you get me.
Yeah.
A lot of things should be done, but I think the conversation is on, but I am as concerned as yourself that it is rather slow. And I think there's a lot of, I remember, for example, my president, the Honorable Chagwani, said that he wanted these reforms, but we cannot trust himself in the reforms. We probably need to first work and see whether we can deal with the balance of power in the country so that we can have a much more coherent conversation about reforms. That is his view. But there are members who are saying, no, we must push for the reforms. So is this the cart before the horse or the horse and then the cart? That's part of the conversation.
I remember you were attacked, actually, after the Munyonyo.
Yeah, but I was attacked.
Summit.
But I am what I am because I speak what I believe is feasible. Unfortunately, I'm not a populist. That's the difference that I have with probably people believe differently. People who attacked me more did not understand what I was trying to do for the opposition. Maybe months and years down the road, they'll rise and understand what I had wanted us to do that time and after. It's now 3 months down the road, and that time has been lost.
And we're going to lose time.
For example, I believe that we will not go to the polls without a new constitution. We are working with a mutilated document. The current constitution was predicated on a 2-term presidency. You are now having a life presidency. The makers of the constitution never envisaged a powerful president appointing everyone, usurping all powers. It was on a decentralized system. We are now working on a centralized system. Is it the same constitution? I believe a conversation for a new constitution would be in high gear. If we go to the polls in this shape, it's done and dusted. It would be the most unfortunate thing for the opposition to go to the polls with the same document, with the Electoral Commission in the same shape. Remember, we are not running a democracy. We are under the power of gun rule. And for you to be able to crawl back on gun rule, you must force some reforms so that you can empower people. Our people are sometimes ordinary. Sometimes our expectations of our people are too high that we lose sight of our space as leaders to guide the population. And that's why we lose it. I hope it's the beauty in my party is that the conversation does not stop. We do not agree on everything, but we have never disagreed on talking about the possibilities. And when we eventually see what is feasible, we go for it. I hope it does happen sooner than later.
do you believe that the Honorable Norbert Mao, who is or who was one of your own, I don't know, well, he's still the Democratic Party president, now he's the minister in charge of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, whose mandate is actually to table these reforms. Are you optimistic that with him having been in the opposition and one of the persons who advocated for electoral reforms then will actually make this come true? Are you optimistic in his leadership as the Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs?
The reforms we're talking about are not supposed to be a ritual. That is one Honorable Norbert Mao has tabled reforms. They have nothing to do with him as an individual, and he can only table what his leaders have sent him to do. It's like expecting me to table reforms. I will not table my own views. I can only table the views of the opposition, NUP. Mao doesn't have his own reforms. Mao will table the reforms Mr. Museveni desires. And I have nothing to hold against Mr. Mao. I am sure if he was the Mao acting on his own, he would have tabled the reforms yesterday. But he is a man acting on instructions. So I would be a bad person to hold anything against him as an individual. Probably his heart and body are in different places. And it's forgivable.
Interesting. What's your relationship with the Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi? How is your relationship with him? With your president?
The Honorable Kyagulanyi is my leader, he is my party president. I am his deputy. That's the relationship.
Is everything going on smoothly as it is supposed to be?
How is it supposed to be? He is my leader. He is the party president. I am the deputy in charge of Uganda region. I am the leader of the opposition in parliament. Is that in doubt in your view?
Do you have any misunderstandings within the party between you and the president?
There are no misunderstandings. But just to know that the Honorable Kyagulanyi and myself are not conformists, if that's what I need to know. We're not conformists. We question everything. Okay? And that should happen for a party to move forward. Honorable Kyagulanyi does not swallow whatever I give him. Neither do I swallow everything from him. Because we are building a young organization that has no history. We question everything. And the beauty is that when we question an activity or an action, it's not a personal quarrel. We don't quarrel, no. We are so decent that there's no need for a quarrel. But we discuss everything openly. We involve organs of the party on a view held. This is NUP, 3 years. If you're looking for elders of NUP, I'm one of them at 47 years. An elder of the party. We are building an organization. And when you're building an organization, you cannot build it as conformists. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sirs. Those are optimists. And I'm not one. The Honorable Kyagulanyi is an open person. That's his character. He's open. He will disagree with you. You will discuss a disagreement and move on. That's how it works. So do you see him simply swallowing everything? Do you see me do that either?
You stand up to him on things that you disagree on principle.
We have even had meetings with the caucus. The caucus disagrees with him openly. He makes his point, they make their point. That's how we are building NUP. Okay? So those who think that we quarrel and do what, that doesn't happen. We are building an organization. And it takes that. It takes serious men and women to build organizations that are enduring. Unless you're pretending. But building an organization that will, you see, we have all this mass support of Ugandans. You must be serious to consolidate it. You must be serious to be able to make it bear upon the direction you want it to take. As leaders, it takes that. Solomon. That's how I work with my boss. All of us are open people, we talk. A disagreement is not a quarrel. There are areas over which he has his desired approach. I show him my desired approach, preferred approach. Then we come to the center and work. You know, and for me, that is a healthy working environment.
What does the future look like for NUP ahead of the 2026 elections?
The NUP had a huge chance, probably more than any other party after independence, and it will take a high level of smartness in organization, in structuring, to be able to partake of a huge dividend of support from young people. You see, when you have 15, 16-year-olds supporting you, that positives long term. Young, middle, and old supporting you. And when you draw the pyramid, the population pyramid of Uganda, it is wider at the base. And that's where NUP is. So all you need is to organize. Because the NUP support is well mobilized. Organize it into an output. The future is bright, but it will take us to smell the coffee, put it where it's supposed to be. Yeah.
The Honorable Mathias Mpuuga, thank you so much for speaking to us on the hard questions.
Thank you.
Well, I've been speaking to the leader of opposition in Parliament, the Honorable Mathias Mpuuga, on so many things. I'm Solomon Serwanja, and this is the hard questions.